You ever try to start a new habit, you're all in, and then poof, it's gone a week later? Yeah, we've all been there. So today, we're going to crack open the ideas in James Clear's Atomic Habits and figure out why this secret to massive change isn't about massive effort. It's actually about starting unbelievably small.
So this is the big promise right on the cover, right? Tiny changes, remarkable results. But how does that even work? How can a change so small you barely even notice it lead to something that totally changes your life? It almost feels like a trick, but it all comes down to the crazy, kind of magical power of compounding.
This whole philosophy wasn't just dreamed up in some quiet library. It was actually forged in a moment of total personal catastrophe for the author, James Clear. This isn't just theory. It's a strategy that was born from having to rebuild a life, literally from the ground up.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. One single, random, devastating moment that changes absolutely everything. This is where it all started. This is the moment that forced him to rethink how you get your life back, not with some huge, ambitious plan, but with the smallest, most manageable steps imaginable.
In the aftermath, it was brutal. We were talking about injuries that sound like they're straight out of a movie. Multiple skull fractures, both eye sockets shattered, brain swelling, even a medically induced coma. This wasn't just a minor setback. His life basically had to be reset to zero.
So how do you even begin to come back from that? Well, Clear quickly realized he couldn't just jump back into his old life. The only path forward was to focus on the smallest possible wins. Not running a mile, but just walking in a straight line. Not studying for hours, but just focusing for 15 minutes. And right there, that's the origin story of Atomic Habits.
And this leads us straight into the core, the central idea of the entire book. It's all about the surprising math behind getting just 1% better every single day.
Okay, so here's where the numbers get a little bit mind-blowing. If you improve by just 1% each day, you don't end the year 365% better. Nope. Because of compounding, because each day's gain builds on the last, you actually end up almost 38 times better. That is the explosive, almost hard-to-believe power of tiny, consistent effort.
Think about it like this. An airplane takes off from Los Angeles, headed for New York City. If the pilot adjusts the course by just 3.5 degrees, a change so small you wouldn't even feel it on the plane, it won't land in New York. It'll land in Washington, D.C. A tiny, tiny adjustment at the beginning leads to a completely different destination. In our daily habits, they work exactly the same way.
So if this math is so simple, so powerful, why do we all give up on our New Year's resolutions by February? Well, it's because we all inevitably fall into what Clear calls the valley of disappointment.
Look, we expect progress to be a nice, neat, straight line. We put in the work, we see the results, simple. But in real life, it doesn't work that way. The most powerful outcomes are always delayed. So we go through this really frustrating period where we're doing all the right things, but it looks like nothing is happening. This valley? This is where good intentions go to die, because it feels like it's not working.
It reminds me of the story of the stonecutter, right? He hammers away at a rock 100 times, and not a single crack appears. Then, on the 101st hit, the rock splits in two. Now, was it that last blow that did it? Of course not. It was the accumulated pressure of all 100 hits that came before it. That's what it takes to get through the valley.
Okay, so how do we actually stick with it long enough to see those results? Thankfully, Clear gives us an incredibly simple and practical framework. He calls it the 4 laws of behavior change. This is basically the operating system for your habits. For any good habit you want to build, you just need to make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. And what's really cool is that to break a bad habit, you just invert them, make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. Simple, right? Let's quickly go through building good ones.
So first up, make it obvious. A great real-world example of this is from Japanese train operators. For safety checks, they physically point at signals and call out what they see. It's a tiny act, but it makes an unconscious process conscious, and the result, it reduces errors by a staggering 85%. The lesson for us is to design our environment so the cues for our good habits are just impossible to ignore.
Law number 2, make it attractive. We have to want to do the thing. A brilliant little trick for this is called temptation bundling. You basically pair something you need to do with something you want to do. For example, you're only allowed to watch your favorite trashy reality show while you're on the treadmill at the gym. It connects an immediate reward to the habit.
Now, law 3, make it easy, might just be the most powerful one of all, because it just completely demolishes our excuses. It's called the 2-minute rule. The idea is that any new habit you start has to take less than 2 minutes to do. So read before bed becomes read 1 page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes roll out my yoga mat. You see? You're not trying to achieve the final outcome. You're just mastering the art of showing up.
And finally, Law 4. Make it satisfying. Our brains are hardwired to repeat actions that feel good, so we need some kind of immediate reward. A super simple way to do this is the paperclip strategy. You get 2 jars. You fill one with, say, 100 paperclips. Every time you complete your habit, you move 1 paperclip to the empty jar. That small physical act gives you a satisfying visual of your progress and makes you want to do it again.
Okay, this all leads to a really fundamental shift in thinking that underpins this entire book. It's about this idea that we should forget about goals and focus entirely on our systems.
Think about it. A goal is the result you want, like winning a championship. The system is the process that gets you there, like never missing a practice. And here's the kicker. Winners and losers often have the exact same goals. The only thing that separates them is their system, which leads to one of the most important lines in the book. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
And that brings us right back to the name itself, Atomic Habit. It actually means 2 things at once. First, it's atomic as in an extremely small, indivisible unit of a larger system. But it's also atomic, as in the source of immense, explosive energy or power. It's both things, the tiny building block and the source of incredible transformation.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Small habits don't just add up, they compound. This isn't simple addition, it's multiplication. Your efforts build on each other day after day after day until you hit that exponential curve of growth. The results aren't just a little bigger, they are orders of magnitude bigger.
So let's just end with a question for you to think about. What is that one tiny 1% change you could make, starting today? What's the one atomic habit that, if you just stuck with it, could completely transform where you are a year from now?